whoever did this, I think they were pretty smart about it.
I was in security and I got locked in. I was really sus.
I think it's one of the Kyles. I'm not sure which.
So Coil is Coil, obviously, and Fruity Boot is Kyle P. Okay. Right.
Kyle, where did you say you were?
Okay, let me see. Well, I started off in admin downloading files. I needed to get all the textures into a PNG format so I can edit them later on. I'll put a link to the video that I used in the description because they can explain it far better than I can. But once all the files were downloaded, I was able to bring them into Photoshop as PNGs and edit only the assets I needed to. Step 1 was finding the hats file specifically and creating the Mandalorian helmet from, well, Disney's The Mandalorian. I found a reference picture that was roughly the same angle that it needed to be, but I also had to go through and find the right pre-existing hat to base my design off of. I wound up going with this purple one here because it's a hat that also goes over the player's face, so it had the same rough design as it. All I had to do was make it a little bigger and, change almost everything about it. So on a new layer, I started off with the basic shape of the helmet using that thick black outline that gives Among Us its signature style. And because Among Us is a bit more of a minimalist game, as in a lot of the assets don't have too much detail, I had to leave a lot out, such as like glares on the visor, metal lines, indentations, all that kind of stuff. Which, honestly, this made later steps easier to do because I didn't have to do as much, but we'll get to that later. Actually, come to think of it, that's all I really did for the helmet other than color, so we can move on to the next step now. In this step, I wanted to design the Mandalorian armor. My original plan was to actually design the player itself, change that, but I couldn't figure out a way to do that because they use the same model and just different color files or something to do that, so I decided instead to just alter one of the costumes, or skins, whatever they're called. I had to find the perfect one, and I wound up going with this one called Wall, because I can use the belt that was already on it as like Mando's utility belt. All I did was change the buckle there. But when I brought the file into Photoshop, I didn't realize I had to change so many different images. Oh boy. Alright. Let's get started. No. We're done. That really wasn't as bad as I thought. The trick in the latter half was going color by color, like I mentioned Jazza mentioning in my Jazza PowerPoint animator video. It might not have actually been faster in practice, but I did feel like I was going through them a lot quicker than doing a whole skin, going over to the next one, changing that, going to the next one. The colors just made it appear faster, even though it might not have actually been faster. But now I had the helmet and the armor, and the Mandalorian was done. I could have gone into a game. Nobody would have seen it because they wouldn't have had the correct files, but I would have seen it and I would have felt cool, but something felt like it was missing. And then when I was double checking to make sure I had the assets right in the game, I remembered that there was a pets option, and it practically spelt out the answer to me. Baby Yoda. Or Grogu. So I had to go in, find the pets file, and buy the pets pack, and decided to replace this robot with Baby Yoda. Mostly because the general body shape was the same, where it was a lot more boxy and square. So where the robot's body would be is where I would put Baby Yoda's cloak, and they would have roughly the same shape. And because the robot had a very limited movement as well, I didn't have to change much between each variation like I did with the costume, because they were all at different angles and shapes and sizes. So I really just drew out Baby Yoda once, and with a few variations, copied him to every instance of the robot that was on that file. And now I made a few tweaks here and there. Mainly I changed the perspective up and down to make it look like he was shuffling, and in some instances where the robot's head was pointed up, I tilted Baby Yoda's head up. And in a few I also changed the facial expressions. Now, the hardest part about all of this, except the hats, because they didn't have it. But because there were so many different images scattered around the files, I didn't know what order I didn't know what order the images go in to simulate movement in the game. So I couldn't do anything like large scale to simulate that motion. So a lot of it is a little static, but I still think it works because the way it moves, it still simulates that motion. And I did tweak it a little bit to fix that, but not as much as it is in the actual game itself. I still think it turned out really well though, but I didn't know if everything was in order or out of order, so it made it hard to understand what came after what. And another thing is I wanted to do the cape on the Mandalorian armor too, but that would have been outside the confines of the pre-existing skin, and because the jetpack would block off some of it and the skin doesn't actually go all the way up the body, I decided to take it out because I didn't see where it was going, and I also didn't know where like the bounding boxes were, so I didn't know where the color, or I didn't know where the costume would cut off had I gone outside the pre-existing boundaries. So despite those two minor pitfalls, I'm actually really happy with how it turned out, and now we can jump in game to see it in action. Let's roll the montage! And that's about it. This was actually a pretty cool project to take on because I wasn't too sure about it first, but when it started realizing how easy it was to extract the files and designing and all that, I became pretty confident in what was going on. I really like how this turned out. None of it was necessarily hard work. You can do this yourself. It's just somewhat time consuming. But hey, that's art. I would really love to do this project again, so let me know down in the comments what character I should do next, and maybe once I start getting more and more characters, I'll put out a whole pack of characters designed by me that you can implement into your own Among Us game. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to check out everything down below, subscribe and like and all that good stuff, and I will see you next time. Have a maximum day. Goodbye.